I think when you think of, a lot of folks, I think it's like one of those keywords right now, community, mental health. But I think people also, we're either neglecting or deciding to not acknowledge mental illness, right? So when something is healing, it's because it's not well, right? And so oftentimes, especially like in our community, or how I heard about this growing, oh, está loca. Like, oh, siempre está llorando. Like, oh, God. It's all about, like, what's wrong with the individual, with the person. Like, something is unwell within themselves, and they need to figure it out, right? Because it's a burden on everyone else, and now everybody has to take care of that person, and it's like, all right. Like, nobody wants that burden, right? Like, que se cuide sola. And when you think of a collective, communal, caring for a person, like, that's the world I want to see.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back to school. But don't worry, everything is cool. I'm your host, Jalissa, and of course, I am here with the boys, Steve and Brandon. Say what's up, you guys.
What's up?
And we have a special guest today. We got Denise from Las Cafeteras, La Mera Cafetera.
Thank you.
Hello, welcome.
Welcome.
Hi.
I like the energy you're bringing.
Yeah.
This is
I
good.
know, I had to, y'all.
Yeah, it's always good. Bright and early in the morning, I guess.
Kind
of.
Slight morning.
It's like
Slight morning.
musician morning.
Yeah, exactly.
For our listeners, it's like morning because it comes out at 8. So,
All right, it's morning, y'all.
Good morning. Everybody
Wake
get
up.
ready. Yeah, wake up.
Cafecito time.
If we're in your car right now, hope you drive to wherever you have to go safely.
Yeah, be safe. Love you guys. Love you guys for listening and tuning in. It's always a good time. So, Denise, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
Oh, wow, that's a big question. I sound like, I feel like I'm applying to college. Well, my name is Denise Carlos. I'm from Southeast LA. I'm a musician, lyricist, front woman for a band Las Cafeteras from Los Angeles. Daughter of immigrants, we all always like to say that. Chicana, feminist, Pocha, Jane of all trades. I do it all.
And how did your band, how did that get started?
Actually, I always like to say, like, we weren't ever meant to be here, but I think we were absolutely meant to be here, los caminos de la vida. We started playing son jarocho in a space called the East Side Cafe in El Sereno, which was very much led by the principles of the Zapatistas in Chiapas, Mexico.
Nice.
Each one teach one mentality, horizontal leadership. We have everything we need in our communities to thrive. And so this band wasn't really meant to be a band. We were just a group of, community organizers in the early 2000s that really needed a space to express and to play, basically, It's hard, y'all.
Yeah.
So we had a friend who started teaching son jarocho classes, and folks just would drop by, play jaranas for hours and hours, have fandangos here in LA and Santana, and as we started playing in protest and marches, because we met as college organizers. Folks started asking us to perform, like bautizos, quinceañeras, like divorce parties. So we're like, hey, we should probably rehearse. And some people were down. Some people were like, I just want to come and do this like on the weekends. Some we're like, okay, I'm down. Like, let's play this music. And 15 years later, here we are. We have 3 core members now still playing in the band, and we have 4 friends who are master musicians who help move this band along. And so our purpose is really to tell our stories, from the east side of LA. And we're able to go all over the country. Outside of the country, we've been going to New Zealand and Australia and beautiful places, Canada. We're big in Canada, y'all.
Oh, wow.
I don't know who can say that, but we can. And that's what we do, Las Cafeteras. This is, we're celebrating our newest album called Night in Napantla, which is really our 3rd studio album because we're blessed to tour a lot. So we have a really hard time balancing and recording and touring. So that's what we do, y'all. There's so much.
Yeah.
So like the history of this band is pretty deep and layered. So.
And how was it? I know you slightly mentioned it before, but how was it for you because you went to college and then now pursuing your musical career? How was that for you? Because I know you mentioned like your parents were like kind of opposed to it. So how was that journey for you?
Yeah, they're like, ponte a trabajar. Well, it's interesting because, I think a lot of folks might resonate with this, being first generation, born here in the U.S. My mom's from Jalisco, Mexico. My dad is from Baja California, Mexico. And he settled in Boyle Heights in the 70s. My mom was in South Central. And they raised my sister and myself in Southeast LA, so like Maywood, Bell, Huntington Park. That's where I was raised. And there's a big pressure to kind of make the sacrifice, mean something. They've lost so much, and so now it's my turn to kind of take that burden on and make it all worthwhile. And so for us, there was a big goal in our home, like, you have to go to college. You have to buy a house, you have to get married, like this, the farce of the American dream, right? Which was very much real for my parents. And so I went to Cal State LA and I got my bachelor's in social work. So that was something I always wanted to do since I was in high school, because, I was a problem child and I had to go to a therapist during, and I hated her so bad. And now I'm like, you're my hero. Yeah. And then I went to Chicago. I went to Loyola for my master's degree in clinical social work. So I actually was a psychotherapist for a bit. My emphasis was on community mental health. And so when I came back from Chicago, my friends were playing Son Jarocho. My partner at the time was arrested at the South Central Farm. So a long time ago, right? The South Central Farm was the largest urban garden in the U.S., which is no longer here. But I was running the Gender and Sexuality Center at Cal State LA, and I was doing, counseling, and I'm going to sneeze.
It's all good. I hate when that happens too.
It's like,
it wants to come out, right? It's teasing you.
Like, sí voy, no voy. So I was running the Gender and Sexuality Center at Cal State LA for about 6 years. And the music kind of took over, right? And so it was a hobby that then, had these opportunities to travel and perform in different states. And my parents, I think at the time, were like, oh, that's different. Like, I never grew up playing music. My parents are not, they don't have a musical background. I actually grew up dancing folklorico. So, yeah. So I was 15 when I started dancing folklorico. And, my parents were like, well, this is a hobby. This is something, para pasar el tiempo. And they're like, as long as it doesn't, as long as it doesn't interrupt or influence like your job. And I was like, no, I'm good. And then, we started performing more. And then Hector and I were both working full time, and we'd leave on a Friday after work, come back Monday right before meetings. Like, it was stressful. And everyone, one by one, started really talking well, are we going to do this? Like, are we going to really put, our efforts into the music? And I was like, I have health insurance and I'm good, y'all. Like, I worked really hard for this. I was 23 when I got my graduate degree, and that's almost 20 years ago. And, it was lonely. I was often the only non-white person in my class. And I think for me, I felt like I fought for this, and I have a duty. To respect the time, my parents sacrificed, and my time as a Chicanita that was out in the world. Again, no one I knew had ever gone to grad school. It was not easy. I had a flip phone. There was not even smartphones then, and I was just really not trying to let go of that, because it was such a big part of my identity. And I'm also not a risk taker. So I figured I was the last one who I was holding on. I was holding on to because I love my job. And, I love the work I did. And I was like, you know what, Denise? Un día vas a ser viejita. You don't want to be that person that's oh, I should have. Or what if, because, and this is I learned to accept it more every time I explained it to my parents, because when they were shocked too, they were really dumbfounded, why would you do this? You have a good job. That was the ultimate goal, right? And then when I would explain over and over, And it was very emotional. You know, it wasn't like one conversation. They're like, okay, we trust you.
Yeah.
And it was like years of talking about it. But I think the more I talked about it with them, the more I accepted it myself, because I did feel like a failure. And I did feel like I was betraying them and I was betraying my younger self. But I also was like, this is an adventure. And like, you know, I think now like little Denise inside me is like really proud that I actually like went for it. And I'm still like delayering all the like, who do you think you are? Like, you weren't put on this earth to like play music. Like, you never sang before, and I didn't, you know. And I think I wonder, right, the larger scheme of things, like what does it all mean? But I think my parents, you know, having those conversations and really talking about like, what does it mean to have children in the U.S.? What does it mean to immigrate? And what are the dreams? How do the dreams morph and evolve? And I even would be like, why didn't you have bigger dreams for me? You know, I had like these like, kind of like, estaba corajuda yo, like, hey man, like, yeah, I went to college.
Yeah.
I you know, social workers are going to have work forever.
Yeah.
Problems are not going away.
Yeah.
And I could go back. You know, I'm like, you gave me the audacity to dream. You gave me the audacity to choose. It's not just going on a 9 to 5. And, you know, it's a hard conversation, because I think as young people who have really good relationships with your parents, like, you still want to make them proud, even as adults. And you still feel like, man, regañados, like when you leave the house and they're like not happy and you're like, I just want you to be proud, you know?
Yeah. I totally feel that too, because I think the extra layer of it is being like a first generation. I liked what you said about how there's almost like this guilt that you feel because you chase something knowing that your parents sacrificed so much to come into this country. So you feel like in order to pursue something that's a little more artistic or something that requires more of a risk, you feel like you're being guilty because my parents give me so much, and am I just squandering all that effort? Like, am I just wasting all that effort? But I think, at least specifically when it comes to you, I think one of the things that's beautiful about your journey is that because of who you are as a person, because of your heritage, this whatever field you go into, you're still doing something for our community, because you see people like us who have never been in that spotlight before.
Yeah.
So I think I totally relate to that, because I think I feel that too. I definitely feel, for me, whenever I've pursued anything, like whether it's been through social media or this podcast, I think I feel that like I really hope that I'm not letting my parents down. Like it's almost like what they think about is a priority over what I think about. So I completely 100% agree with what you're saying too.
No, yeah. I was like, I also can relate and understand. And honestly, what you're saying is also just really beautiful of like, it is hard to for sure, like, I guess kind of pursue your own dreams when your parents have had like their own dreams for you. But I feel like in a weird way, it has kind of worked out. Like you kind of fell into this area and like it's working out for you, you know? And it's going to be bigger and better for the way that you're being your true self. Like I read about you guys and like your music and how you're using your music to also like talk about different things, and especially with like women, right, and all those things. And I think it's really beautiful what you guys are doing, especially for the community. Like my brother said, like you guys are still doing something for the community and being in those spaces where before, like you've never seen people in those spaces before, and you guys are creating that space for other people and for yourself. And I think that's really great to like see.
Yeah, and
Voy a llorar, girl.
and I had a question, because you mentioned that you were obviously had a background in social work, and you mentioned briefly before even in therapy, right? So I was wondering how that carries over in when you make music, right? Like, do you carry some of that, like, I guess some of the missions and goals that you had with your social work of trying to help the community? How does that translate into making your art?
Yeah, so, you know, I think your first muse is yourself. And it's the hardest to tap into, right? And so I always say, like, I do this for the women, you know, the women I came from, the women who will come from me one day, and the women I've been, you know, all the layers of mujeres that I have been and I want to be. As a therapist, I remember just having these moments of humility and just being like you have to be humble enough to feel like honored to hear somebody's story, right? And to see somebody's process. And because I didn't grow up performing as a musician, like I was so shy growing up, and as a dancer, I always say dancing saved me from myself, because I was a very self-harming teenager. I wanted to disappear. And I remember as a dancer, I kind of, you know, it's like a phoenix, you know, that you rise from the ashes. And I think I rose from the ashes over and over every time I danced, but also as a singer and as someone who never wanted to be seen. I've also stepped into that when I see like young women and girls kind of like light up, right? And although we had a lot of women in our group in the beginning, like at this point, like I'm the female representation in this group. And as a mujer, like I understand like my first identity, the way that the world sees me and the way I walk this world is as a woman. Yes, as a Pocha, as a Chicana, as a, you know, person of color from the hood or whatever. But for me, as a person who has worked as a therapist, like I always understood that somebody's story is ever evolving, and that there's always, you know, those forks in the road that will change that. When I write, I speak through those, you know, moments of possibility and through rising, right? And also through acknowledging, because you have to acknowledge pain and trauma and hesitance and discomfort. You have to acknowledge that to understand the growth that happens, and to really acknowledge the beauty in the process of growing and becoming you. And so when I write, I absolutely write through a woman's lens, because that's who I am. And so I used to think like, ¿qué estoy haciendo yo? Right? It's just, I'm singing. I'm writing these little verses. I feel good. That makes sense for this moment now. But when I watch people, when we sing these things and they're singing back to me, and I understand like these are moments of joy that don't happen often in our community, and that we, again, absolutely deserve, right? So when you talk about radical joy, when you talk about being proud, when you talk about Viva la Mujer, you know, these are exclamations that we as a people use to heal, right? And to claim like space. And I think I have to, again, when I step outside of myself, say like, these are important words, because I am not speaking for a community I don't belong to. Like I am the community, right? And I am these young women. And if they see themselves in me, I see myself in them. And so as someone who worked in, again, community mental health, I absolutely think that dancing and singing and crying together, acknowledging the pain together as a community, also allows us to feel stronger, also allows us to claim like this existence as ourselves. And part of that is being able to play, right? And when I mean play, I don't mean play an instrument. I mean like jugar, like come into your childhood self again, and like deshacerse de all the things that held us down. And so it feels like something so simple is actually like so deep to me. And I just feel so honored to be able to witness that, because I don't think it's me. I think it's something's coming through me. And even like when we talk, like Hector and I talk, and the band talks, like you do your best, right? You do your best to tell your story. But then in the process, in the journey, you find your community. And we find that we are, you know, it's like the joven la quesh, right? Eres mi otro yo. Like we find this like reflection of each other, the beautiful parts, right? And the painful parts, but also like as a community, we're working that out together.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that you brought up community mental health. I've never really heard it be presented like that. I guess when you hear mental health, it's typically presented as a very deeply personal experience. Mm-hmm. So I guess even in you know, healing that also kind of seems very like a solo act. Mm-hmm. So I guess I have a question and a comment. So I think it's interesting that you kind of fell into music, because that's kind of like a communal experience, especially since you come from a communal background with mental health. So I think that's really cool and poetic. But I guess my question for you was like, what's the like difference, or like what's the significance of like community mental health, and as opposed to how it's typically presented?
I think when you think of, you know, a lot of folks, I think it's like one of those keywords right now, community mental health. Mm-hmm. But I think people also, we're either neglecting or deciding to not acknowledge mental illness, right? So when something needs healing, it's because it's not well, right? And so oftentimes, especially like in our community, or how I heard about this growing, oh, está loca. Like, oh, siempre está llorando. Like, oh, God. You know, it's all about, like, what's wrong with the individual, with the person. Like, something is unwell within themselves, and they need to figure it out, right? Because it's a burden on everyone else, and now everybody has to take care of that person, and it's like, all right, like nobody wants that burden, right? Like, que se cuide sola. And when you think of a collective, communal, you know, caring for a person, like that's the world I want to see, right? Where we're not seen as individuals when something's not positive, right? See, like we go through like our lives like in community, right? And so it doesn't make sense that when you're not well, like you're isolated. And so when we talk about seeing a world where many worlds fit, we also have to see like this idea of, you know, and it's an ethos that Las Cafeteras go by, isang baksak, which is a Pinoy, a Filipino saying, one rise, right? And so the idea is one rise, we all rise, one fall, we all fall. And so I think when you're looking at a collective community, like evolution or journey, you can't just take one person's achievement and say like that person, like there's something special about that person and they did it alone, right? We have to also understand that we're all part of that that person's journey to rise up. Or if they fall, if something's not well, that we all have the responsibility and accountability to help that person rise up again. And so I don't know if the industry of community, you know, of mental health really is all there, right? Because then there'd be more funding for these kind of resources. But I think as Chicana, like as a Chicana and as a Pocha and as a person from a Mexican family, like I'd like to see us really, you know, siempre la familia, but when something like, oh no, it's cholo, like that person's like over there. But what is it that people do? Like they want to find community and they want to find family, right? Yeah. And so it's like we as beings need to, you know, be close to someone, be close to something and be embraced by that something. And so the more you do that, the more accountable you are, whether it's positive or negative.
That's so interesting. So it's like less about me and more about we. Like it's about what we can do collectively. I find that so interesting because I think that sticks very true to as a culture. Like they talk about a lot in Mexico, it's very collective, and here in the States it's very singular. And so I think if people put themselves in the mindset of, if let's say on the street you see like a cholo or you see somebody who's underprivileged, you less blame them and you blame more of like, what are we like failing our community and doing? And I think it pushes people to feel more empowered, because at least just hearing you speak, I think that makes me feel good, because I think about people who succeed out of our community, it's because there were certain things and certain qualities in us that really like kind of like fostered and just like took care of those qualities and made them rise up in the community. And I think that's such a beautiful way of thinking. And I wanted to touch up a little bit about what you said. What do you self-identify as? Because there's a lot of labels that as a Latino, Mexican, and Chicano, they can go by. What do you self-identify as?
I identify as both a Pocha and a Chicana.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when I was, you know, it depends on the spaces and who understands what that means. You know, again, we look at how we reclaim labels and words that may hurt us. And then we're like, you know what? I'm changing the definition of that, and I'm totally gonna like wear it as a crown. And as again, the daughter of Mexican immigrants, there was in my upbringing like this shame of being not Mexican enough, not speaking Spanish correctly, and you know, having to live in different worlds. And so I remember that word was so painful and so shameful. And when I was in high school, my sister's 5 years older than me, and she would always take me to like protests. And so I learned the word Chicana very young. I learned the word feminist very young, and applied these words to me, right? Because I wanted to be a strong woman. I understood that being from like a Mexican background, like was very specific to my experience, my lived experience. And, you know, that word pocha, like even in college, I was like, no, yo no soy pocha, you know, like I'm either Mexicana or I'm a Chicana. And once I went to grad school, like I was like all Chicanita feminist from Mecha. Like I was like, yeah, I could do this. I could conquer the world, you know, like there's 3% like Mexicans and or Latinas coming out of grad school. So I'm going to be one of those. And I was like, basically like, man, I felt like I was run over by a truck, because everything I felt strong about was toppled over by like this feeling of not belonging. And the feeling revisits, right? Not belonging in home, not belonging in your culture, not belonging in the United States, you know, as an American, not wanting to say you're American because that's hurtful too. And so even not wanting to have an accent, the accent I have, you know, when I was in grad school, I remember I was just like, no, I was practicing my English to just sound like proper, quote unquote proper English. And and I remember I was like so angry, and I was like, why aren't there more people like us here? Like, we're smart, like we work hard, you know, we just don't have money, which I just paid my grad school loan this year. So can we celebrate that? Collective
round of applause.
Muchas gracias. You know. It was a lot of money, y'all.
It's for sure hard.
That's hard.
It is. Grad school,
I was like, I don't care. I'm going to pay this off. And I told my mom, and she's like, oh, that's good, finally. And I was like, oh, Mom, you don't even get it. Anyway,
she's
back
like,
to
that's
labels.
cool, I guess.
She's like, cool. You should have done it 5 years ago. And I'm like, Mom, you haven't even paid JCPenney. Like, what? And so I remember coming back from grad school, and it speaks to why I'm able to proudly say, you know, Pocha power. It's because, again, like revisiting the idea of not fitting in growing up and just being like not enough, right? And so, you know, you talk a lot about the no sabo kids now. And I think that's like hand in hand with the pocha, like pochismo, and how we still as an adult woman, being Chicana was like, you know, you apply it to feeling educated and hyper political and proud, you know, and you've evolved from all the madness of racism, and you're like, I'm a Chicana, and this is my cape. And when I think of like being a pocha, like that also speaks to me, right? Because yeah, I'm rascuache, and yeah, I'm defiant. And I think that's what it means to be a pocha, right? And like, I used to think that's what it meant to say I'm Chicana, but I feel like Chicana can also feel like such a polished and privileged experience. I am Chicana because I've been educated. I'm a Chicana because I understand the layers of ways that our peoples were oppressed, right? And like my pocha self, it doesn't matter. My pocha self just understood that I didn't feel good enough. My pocha self understood that I have to speak in Spanglish to make myself feel heard, because that's the way I can communicate, right? And like my pocha self is a little bit more like, has a little chip on her shoulder. Yeah. Which I'm talking through now because I'm like, right? And like my pocha self is okay having like the accent that I grew up with. And I couldn't switch. I can go, like, they're both my home, right? And I wear those crowns very proudly, because I also want the world to understand, like, I did not come from privilege. I'm from Southeast LA. And so, yeah, like my parents worked super hard. I work super hard every day. My band works super hard every day. That's how we were raised. And so that we can be up on a stage and say, like, you know, that we're Chicanas and we're pochas, like, it's such a powerful moment too. But when I speak of those moments of feeling like not good enough and kind of feeling like you don't fit, like that also speaks to our album, right? Our album's name is A Night in Nepantla. Nepantla being the space in between, right? And so kind of like that fuzzy area, the gray area, like where we were always floating lost, like we're finally in a place where we're proud to be from that space.
That's so beautiful too, because I think that first, for some of our viewers who don't understand what the terms Chicana, and Pocha mean, how would you define those words?
Yeah, I mean, I think like textbook, a lot of people would say like being a Chicana is, you know, a person that was born in the U.S. that has lineage from Mexico or Latin America, that has understood that as a community and as a raza or as like an ethnic group, there's been much like oppression, like political, social, financial. And so through those experiences, feeling empowered to do something about it, right? And so to say I'm Chicana, where before it used to be an insult, to say I'm Mexican American, I think there's also a wider and more flexible understanding that you don't have to just be Mexican, you don't have to just be Latina or like Latine or from Latin American like lineage, but that you also have like, you're down, you know? Yeah. I don't even know how to explain you're down, but y'all know.
Yeah,
you're down. And like you're
brown and down.
Yeah, you're brown and down, right? All kinds of like shades of brown. Yeah. but you're willing to like look at the scope of oppression and say like, I'm going to do something about it, right? Or I'm going to represent my people well.
And Pocha and Pocha.
And being a Pocha, I think a lot of times we as young, like as children of Mexican families or Spanish speaking parents, I think that we're, when we're less of a shade of like an authentic Mexican or an authentic Latino, it's kind of like I would say an insult. Like that's the way I experienced it. I didn't say the words right in Spanish, Pocha. I didn't know how to, clean right. Eres una pocha. I didn't want to say like Viva Mexico, like eres pocha. Like you're not proud to be Mexican, but also you don't live your life like authentically as a Mexican. And it's like I kind of think, it sucks. Like I think it creates generational trauma. Like that's unnecessary. But I wonder, and I think we should do a survey. I wonder how it feels to call your kids that. Like what is the purpose? What is the function? And how do you think it affects your children? Because my mom will be like, remember when you were so ashamed to be Mexican and you wouldn't speak Spanish? And I was like, because I was in school speaking English all day, and like I didn't see myself in any like movies or TVs or whatever. And like I come home and just suddenly I'm supposed to be like hyper Mexican. Like I was floating. I didn't know. And so having that conversation is still a little like it stings,
Yeah, I think that's what I found beautiful, specifically about Pocha and Pocha, the way you're speaking on it, is that I think there's this big community of people who go unseen, who are Mexican American, who don't feel like, obviously we always feel this, we're not accepted in Mexico, we're not accepted by the Americans, but specifically there's this like pain there that makes us feel as though like we'll never be that, we'll never truly be Chicano enough or be like Mexican enough. And so where do we lie? Because we still don't have anywhere to go. But Pocha and Pocha is like, I guess even though it's a hurtful word, to take that back and reclaim that, you create a new community of people who are exactly like you, who didn't really understand it. Because as a kid, you're just a kid. You don't understand these big concepts of like ethnicity, culture, heritage. So you grow up, like you said, what you said I related to so much about like, I grow up and I watch movies and I watch TVs and I listen to music and I don't feel represented there. Maybe there's Mexican music, but there's no Mexican American music as much as there is now as an adult. So obviously I grew up and I felt like I was losing some culture, but I didn't question it. And so like the Pocha and Pocha like claims that people would give me, like they were accurate, but they were hurtful. But now to grow up and like reclaim that creates just such a beautiful new community that I can't help but be optimistic about what the future generations of Mexican Americans can relate to. Because I don't think it makes us any less of like being proud of our culture, and I don't think it means that we're somehow resentful of anybody who's Mexican or Mexican American. But I think it opens up the umbrella of what is acceptable and what truly makes you like a proud like inheritance of your culture. So I think that's really beautiful, and I wanted to know, like, how do you represent your identity through your music?
It's interesting because, in a lot of festivals where, we do, they say we do world music, right? Because they don't know where to put us.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes, and I think this is where I started seeing like how powerful the work that we do is, oftentimes in music festivals, we are put under world music or we're put under Mexico, like representing Mexico. And so because we, in our journey have gone from playing like super traditional son jarocho, mostly in Spanish. So I think when people like see that, or our name is in Spanish, Las Cafeteras, they're like, oh, like they play Mexican music, they're representing Mexico. And again, like in our journey to identify, like it's been really hard to say we are American. Right? So even cuando vamos a Canadá, like they'll put Mexico. But saying like this is American folk music because we're raised in the United States and we created this folk music that is American, right? Is really like controversial, right? And so when we look at our identity as individuals, like we are so fast to say we're Mexican, right? Because our parents like drilled that into us, like you have to be proud to be Mexican. And you have to be proud because we're always being like stomped on. And so you have to rise up and say like, somos mexicanos. which we are, you know, like I'm only Chicana and I'm only Pocha because I'm Mexican, right? And like I love rancheras and cumbias and like, you know, tamborazo. Like I went to all the quinceañeras, you know. And so the music is influenced by that because this is the music that raised us and that was in our homes. So when we go to festivals and like it's all Mexican, but then we start playing music or we start singing English or Spanglish, like it's very confusing for everybody. Or we come out and talk to people and like everybody wants to like speak Spanish to us and we're like, what? Like, no comprendo. There's all kinds of levels in our band, like super Mexicanos, like from like Mexico to like pochos to like, you know, the different like levels of
Chicano, but proudly like Mexican.
Like, yeah. Or like, I can't say, I know what you're saying, but I can't speak it back, you know? And I think like for us, we're like, when we were doing this song called La Bamba, right? And we changed it to La Bamba Rebelde. La Bamba is such a well-known song, and it is part of a son jarocho genre that's 400 years old. That was a, you know, Black Mexican song. And for us to play La Bamba, it was during the time where like a lot of folks were like, well, y'all are no son de Veracruz, you're not jarochos, you're not even Mexican. Like, who do you think you are playing this music and representing it? And again, confronted with the idea of like, not enough Mexican, like, no eres Mexicana, like, who do you think you are? And I'm like, well, what else am I then? Right? And how do you have to defend yourself over and over and say, my culture is still valid and important and deserves space? And so, like, going all in on the pochismo, right? I'm like, I speak Spanglish. Some people may call us a no sabo kid because, like, no sabo, I don't know. You know, I no sé, like, how to, like, connect to that super traditional culture. And so when we play music now, when we write music, we're totally, I think we're totally in relationship with that space of not this, not that, but all of it, right? Not Mexican enough, not American enough, but, you know, no soy de aquí ni de allá, pero soy de todos lados. And so you may claim those spaces, but those spaces don't always claim you, right? So this is the idea of like, not Mexican, well, Mexico does not claim us. Mexicans do not claim me. The United States does not claim me, and neither do, quote unquote, like Americans. And when we talk about Americans, you visualize, you know, Barbie and Ken or whatever. AKA gringos, right? And so it's like, well, how do we claim ourselves and our stories to be enough and to actually like be able to proudly say, this is American music. This is American folk music. And because Americans don't only look one way, don't only speak one way, and don't only have one ethnic background. And so I think this is where we fail to like evolve as an art, you know, community, even in these spaces where we play music. So many times we're the only band that sing in, you know, Spanish. And that's a powerful space, right? Because then you invite folks that are in the audience to actually feel seen, to sing along with you, to hold space and not feel like we're always in the edge, right?
Yeah.
Of like pidiendo permiso, like, can I be part of this thing? And when you think of the arts and you think of music, you think of like everyone's invited, right? But that's not the case, because that also reflects on what's going on in society and in the community. And so for us to be there and to proudly say, you know, yo no creo en fronteras. And there's people that don't understand this, but they're like, yahoo, right? Like, and I'm like, please do not Speedy Gonzalez me, you know? But there's this connection that happens no matter what political affiliation you may have, no matter what you really feel about people of color. Like in those spaces, there's a transformation of familia, of sisterhood, of brotherhood, of saying like, you know, you see yourself in me, and hopefully if you see me, then you'll see my parents that way. And hopefully you'll see my community that way. And hopefully when you vote, you might think of us as actual people.
Oh,
right?
Wow. Yeah.
And so it can get deep like that, y'all, but I think people just like having fun.
I think it's deep. I think a lot of things are way deeper than people give them credit for. But that reminded me of, you guys spend a lot of time on the road, right?
Yes.
What's life on the road like? What are the highs and lows?
Oh, man. The highs are... What are the highs? Okay, the highs are
it's all lows.
The high obviously is performing. You know, obviously it's like you get to like meet all kinds of people, eat all kinds of food, and that's really cool, because then you start understanding like, you know, we're not very different from each other, but but also you understand, like, as like people from LA, it's like, oh, we're like in a bubble, like in a social political bubble, right? And so like we drive by like places that have Confederate flags. Like we've had to like stop to the bathroom for like gas stations where people have like rifles in their trucks and just looking at us like, and we're like, oh shit, run, you know. And so I think it shows, like, you see the world through physically seeing the world, right? And so the good and the bad. And so that's the beautiful thing of saying, like, we created something out of nothing, and people want to hear it, and people want to dance with it, and what a beautiful life to be able to dance and sing, and, you know, and create community through that. And the lows are like constipation. The lows are like you just don't have a regular routine. Like all that goes out the window. And then obviously, like, I miss my cats, and, you know, I miss my family. But that's hard. Like, I think living or like being married to or living with a person, like a musician who tours, is probably really hard. It's hard in our family. It's hard. Friendships, like, are kind of a thing of like, hold on, like, I'm coming back. Let's have cafecito when I'm back. You know, there's a detachment that happens, right, from the people that help you root you at home. And so, you know, Hector always says this, like, it's unnatural to be with the same people 24/7 for that many days. And I think he had a conversation with Bardo or Eddie from Chicano Batman, and they were talking about touring, and he was like, it's unnatural, man, like, to be with the same people 24/7, and you are. And I think there's like an art to it, right? So we travel in 2 cars now because we know who needs to, like, there's vegetarians. Most of us are we were vegetarians, and so we have the vegetarian car. We have like the carnivore car. We have like the grandma car who has to go to the hotel super early, and then we have the comadre car who wants to like hang out all night. And so you just find your routine. But I mean, I would say, like, this is a beautiful part of our lives, and like we're all in, right? And so I think this new album really reflects who we authentically are as people, where before I think it was really like, how do we proudly represent where we come from, right?
Yeah, I was gonna ask that too. How do you balance staying true to who you are and, I guess, appealing to the music industry and how it's ever changing?
Yeah. Oh man, that's like that's such a again, another in between space. We're not signed with a label, and like, we've always had these conversations of what it means to create work that an audience will embrace, right? And how important is it? And that's hard, right? Because you can, like, go to one day you can have a sold out show, the next day you go somewhere and nadie llega, and you're like, you know. I think that's very humbling, you know. But it's like, what makes people popular as a band, you know? What do people want to hear? Like, what's you know, like, obviously we don't play reggaeton, and we don't do like cumbia tumba, you know. So I think it's very specific to a certain group of people, but we just write like what's true to our hearts. And we also, as listeners of music, you know, evolve in how we want to communicate. And so in this new album, I think the difference is that, like, sonically it's evolved to, you know, we have like influences of like new wave and like electro pop, and like we have some traditional. And so for me, like, I was a super like little goth girl growing up, and but also like I love rancheras and I love cumbias, you know, my dad and my mom. And so it's like I don't have to stay to one genre. Right. So I think there's something for everyone. I think it's definitely more polished than any of our other albums. We have a wonderful musical director and who produced this album. His name is Moises Vaqueiro, and he, you know, is one of the core members of Los Abandoned, who, you know, they're pioneers of you know, Spanglish music here in LA. And so he's from Mexico City, and so he has a lot of he's challenged us a lot to kind of go outside of like the son jarocho genre, because we didn't, you know, Hector, myself, and Jose did not grow up playing music, and we didn't go to school to like have like a polished, educated, understanding
music
of music.
theory.
No, we're just like, oh, I like how this sounds. And he'll be like, this does not work. I'm like, I don't care. Like, I want to. But I just, I love like the moodiness and like the electronic feel. Hector loves like the like super
Upbeat.
upbeat, like chanting, Jose is very, he loves African music. So he likes like that vibe of just, Afro
Beats?
percussive sounds and beats. Yeah. And so there's like something for everyone in this. And there's a lot more English songs in this one too. Yeah. So I think we're really trying to establish like ourselves as Spanish language musicians or interpreters or lyricists. I think now we're just like, you know what? The words come to me in English sometimes, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You are who you are. Yeah.
You are who you are, y'all.
Do you have any memorable moments from like touring? Like some that just like stick out like right away?
Oh man. We were in New Zealand. First of all, hearing that you're going to New Zealand, it's like you never. I mean, I never thought of that.
Yeah, you guys have been everywhere. I think I read.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's changed, but you guys have been in 47 states, right, out of the 50.
Yeah, we've been to a lot of places. I think we debate over how many states we've been in, but yeah, we've been to most. Actually, let me not do New Zealand. Let me do Hawaii. So we were in Hawaii years ago for a week. And first of all, I'm like, there's Latinos in Hawaii? What?
I know, right?
Yeah, we were like popular there. And I'm like, we want to go back. But we do shows for kids too. So we do these things called engagements. We'll like go to universities. We'll have conversations around like anti-racism and gender justice. And so we do that apart from like being on a stage and singing. We have these conversations and these workshops. We also do kids shows like in schools. And so we were in Hawaii, and we just, we did they got bussed in, and we did a show, and, we talk about being proud of where you come from. With kids, you talk about these things a little differently. And their thank you to us was this song, this traditional Hawaiian song. And it was just so beautiful. Like, they were just, like, they stood up, and the teachers are like, well, now we're going to sing you something. And to like kind of be still and have children sing to you, it's such it was like a very emotional moment of like, if I'm not doing this right, I don't know what doing it right is, because like, what a beautiful moment to share. And that someone's offering to you as a song. I think it was like one of the most beautiful moments that I've ever had. That's so simple, but I think it reminded me that songs are offerings. Que es un regalito in one moment, right? So the exchange of that was like really beautiful.
That relates a lot to my next question. Is every band and every artist has a song that really resonates deeply with the audience. It's usually their most popular song. Which song is that to you guys?
Oh man, it's La Bamba Rebelde.
Yeah.
And Luna Lovers, right?
Why and how did you feel seeing that take off?
It's interesting because I don't think we realized it until we started getting bullied by an audience member, like, sing it, and we're like, oh my God. Or you think people are gonna get tired of the same old, and again, we haven't had a new album in such a long time. We're like, well, here we go again. And there's cities that we often go to, and so people know us. This song, I think after we were part of a novela called Bajo el Mismo Cielo, this song kind of took off to super Mexican people, right? My abuelita called me from Mexicali, and she's like, Mika, and like, may she rest in peace. She's like, somos famosas. I'm like, somos? Like, what? First, I'd be like, why are you doing what you're doing? As like my family in Mexico were like, what's going on? Like, why would you sing these traditional songs that are not even from where we're from? And so for them, it was really confusing. But after we were on that novela, it was like all worth it. Like, somos famosas. I'm like, what? So then you see people coming like with their parents to these shows now, where oftentimes it was people our age or a little younger, but they wanted to hear La Bamba Rebelde. And I'm not sure if it's because the music video really speaks to an immigrant experience, and or if it's because we're saying like yo no creo en fronteras, and it's, you know, very you can't deny what it says and what it means. This song, I feel like, became like an anthem, right, for a moment, and people just felt so proud. Like it has that nostalgia, right? It has that traditional nostalgia, but at the same time, we're using it to really talk about the themes that we're living, right? And so we talk about las zapatistas, we talk about like yo no creo en fronteras, and you're talking about immigration, and I think for a lot of people that were like, oh, these are people that were born and raised in the U.S. saying like, I don't believe in borders, and kind of like paying homage to the struggle. And it's also just really upbeat and fun. And then, you know, we do zapateado in it. So I think it feels really good. I think like your ancestral spirit is just alive in that moment, right? And it's always like a song that we've tried to kind of like tuck away and be like, okay, bye.
It's had its moment.
It's had its moment. And then like people are yelling at you like, play it. And you're like, oh, we got to play it. We even told Moises, who's, you know, he tries to rework our set list to be a little bit more in tune with the audience, and he's like, we gotta like stop playing that song, y'all. And I'm like, you're nuts, like it's not gonna happen. I'm like, try it and see what happens. And nope, every show people are like Bamba Rebelde. And then Luna Lovers, it's just, you know, a really simple love song. It's in English, and we've been like flown to people's weddings just to play that one song. It's the song that a lot of times like people come up and they're like, this is my baby, and I was pregnant when I heard this song, and now her name is Luna. And like they're like little kids that are 3-4 years old, and it's like, wow, like an impact of a very simple song, you know. And that song, like we wrote it in El Sereno, and I remember I was going through like this terrible like breakup, and I was just like, girl, love, like what is love? Love does not exist. Like this is fake, you know, fake news. And I remember I wrote like a longer verse, and like it was like edited. So you only hear what I write, what I sing now. But I think sometimes people like the simplicity of like cariño and like amor is like, it's so far beyond us, right? And sometimes you just need to feel proud to feel like love is real. Yeah. And so that is a surprise to me, because people will sing the song. Like we were in Europe and people were singing like the song, like all the lyrics. And I was like, I started crying, because I'm like, wait a minute. How do you even hear this music? You know, and how you sing, like, how am I here in Europe having people sing me my song? And I think when that's not the purpose of the work you do, like you're also humbled in those spaces of like, oh, this means something to somebody, not just me.
I saw it in the comment sections of the music video for La Bamba Rebelde. I was really surprised. Some of the comments took me by surprise. One of them said that they were like, much love from South Africa. I was like, there's Latinos or Mexicans in South Africa.
They like our music.
Yeah. And then there was other comments saying like, I don't even know Spanish, but I just really like the way that the song sounds. And I was like, it goes to show you that I think that some music and sometimes just the storytelling in the music video is enough for no matter who you are, from any background that you come with, you can sit down and relate to something. You can see yourself in something. And I think it relates to what you said, like the whole communal thing of like feeling empowered by one individual. And I think that's really beautiful. Cause that's insane. I'd probably cry too if I felt that, especially if it was a love song about like a breakup.
Well, it wasn't about a breakup. I was going through a breakup.
And she was talking about love.
And that got edited out, remember? Like, downer.
You're like, it was good until we got to this part.
I know, they're like, ooh. Yeah.
Like, you know what? No.
No, they need to limpia. Like, no.
Yeah. I feel like music, like, because what you're saying is just, like, really beautiful, like, all of it. And I just keep thinking, like, I'm a big music lover too, and I think one of the biggest things for sure, like when you guys are like, we don't want to play this song anymore, I think one of the biggest things is that when you kind of like fall in love with the song, it's kind of like you want to hear it live. So when you finally go see like this band, and I know maybe like this specific song is like 5-10 years ago, but it's like you just want to hear that specific song. It's like, because I I probably had this connection to this song and I want to hear it live.
Yeah.
But I know it's hard, like as the actual musician, to be like, we don't want to play it anymore. Like that's in the past.
Tired,
like
yeah.
we're a little tired. Like we want to show you guys our new stuff.
Yeah. That was me and my
but
ex's song.
yeah. But like as a fan, it's like you really just want to hear that, like because like you just get like such a connection to music. And I think that's like the biggest thing is that like I think for people like music is also an escape to a lot of things. And like think especially like for you guys, like talking about things that we can personally connect to, I think is like the biggest thing where we're just like, we want to hear the song.
Yeah,
like
it's so funny too because there's a personal story. Me and my sister went to go see a band once, like a couple years ago, right? And everybody was like, play this song, play this specific song. And the artist literally said like, sorry, I'm not going to play that song. That's about me and my ex. And his wife was there.
And his wife was there, yeah.
So he's
Happens,
like,
y'all.
And we were like, damn. And it was a beautiful song too. And we were like, damn. It's okay though. I guess we get it.
That's the thing. Like, I think people forget, like, hey, like I wrote this song when I was also going through some stuff. So you attach it to like a part of who you were, right? But like, man, if Gwen Stefani could do it, we could do it.
Yeah, I think just fans become very demanding sometimes of like, you owe me this. Like you work for me.
Yeah, I mean, kind of.
You're like, they're like, you made me love this song.
Right?
Yeah.
I know.
Did you guys ever face like crazy fans or like fans that were doing too much?
I want those fans. Call me. I mean, sometimes, like, honestly, like, I'll be performing and I feel like I'm in, like, outside of myself. And then I'll watch myself perform, like, the stories. And I'm like, oh, she looks fun. You know? But I'm, like, not in a trance, but I think I feel like I'm another self. And so I don't really, like, I make contact with people, but I also don't make too much contact with people because then I'll lose myself. I'll just lose it. And I think, like when I saw this video once, we were in, I think it was the San Jose Jazz Fest, and we sing the song called Zapateado. It went from a song being called Zapateado, which is a traditional song, to a song called Not in My Name, or Not in Our Name. And you see this transformation. It's a song that goes from like traditional son jarocho to just, I don't even know how you call it. I guess it's like electro folk. But we're speaking to folks who have been murdered by the police, like Trayvon Martin, or not by folks like black people who have been murdered for being black. And so some of those by the cops, some of those by, folks in the community. And so we talk about like Trayvon Martin, Senator Bland. And so we're saying these names and we're saying, remember my name, remember my name. And we also speak to like, don't, XYZ in my name, right? And so when we're saying remember my name, you see the video, like you see this, it spans out into the audience, and like people are chanting with us because for like we are totally, I think, in a spiritual moment because you call in, right? When you're saying people's names and you're saying remember, like I think we're also like in a very powerful place of like calling in those spirits. And so it spans out from the band into the audience, and people are like están like chillando, right? And like doing this thing almost like you're in church, or like almost like when people are like hearing gospel or whatever. And it's a spiritual place that like is detached now from us as human beings, and just calling in and just having this moment of like of emotion, right? And so I don't think like these people are like crazed fans, but I do think that they're all in with us in those moments and like emotionally just like open and giving. But like, I think people have like really true like connection with us.
Yeah, that must feel insane. Do you ever get imposter syndrome?
Always, every day.
Every day?
Yeah, todos los días. Like, but I'm like, again, once I started hearing, like thinking of this as an offering, I think that's when I started like feeling different.
Yeah, I get you. Especially because you're born and raised southeast Los Angeles, right? How did living and being raised in that environment shape your perspective?
Wow. I don't think I thought of myself like really as a part of like this. When I was growing up, nobody knew what Southeast LA was. Like it wasn't even a space that was called that until later. I think even now, like there's this whole community and like movement of like Sela rising, right? They call it Sela. And when I was growing up it's HP, more Maywood. I think it's like a very traditional place of like working parents and kids that like either you're on the right path or son traviesos, you know. And so I think I was like in that in between of like wanting more, wanting to see more. And I think it felt like I felt like really closed in. And I think when I left to grad school, my parents were like super confused. But I always said it was my Mexican daughter way of like leaving my parents' home. And, you know, I'm like, no me voy a casar, so I'm going to grad school. I felt like it was really confined, like a really limiting and confined place to grow up in. And so I think it didn't stir, like it stirred up these emotions in me that were just very frustrated. And so I think now, like a lot of what I want to do is like feel free, right? And feel limitless. And also understand, like, there was this thing I told my sister, because I would often just be on the porch, right? And I'd just, like, be so, like, I felt hopeless. And I was like, is this it? Is this life? Like, this is it? Like, that's all I would think about. And I just felt, like, so depressed about it. And so whenever I do anything that is kind of cool, I'll, like, text my sister a picture. And I'll be like, got off the porch? ? And she's like, she confirms, like, yes, got off the porch.
Wow.
I want to cry.
That was beautiful. That was beautiful.
I want to cry
this
too.
this is such a beautiful. This is a good segue into basically the last thing that I'm going to ask. When you go on your guys' social media page, the thing that you see the most is how active you guys are and how much activism you guys advocate for. Is there a specific activist cause right now that you are putting your attention to and that you feel like is very valuable that you speak about?
Yeah, I mean, the root of Las Cafeteras was like we met as young people who were organizing, right? And so very much in those days, again, the early 2000s, like our activist work was really centered around being Chicano and around you know, abolishing borders and feeling pride in our communities. So as we've grown, like a lot of my work has been around gender justice and so as a group, I think like we didn't necessarily have like one cause. We understood who we were and that the work that we did was very much informed by that, right? And so now like we very much, you know, have aligned ourselves and have really like been students and been allies in the way that we have been asked to through, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement. And so understanding like what allyship is and what it means to like not being part of a community but still stand up with that community. I think we're always learners, right? And I think like you always have to be when you're saying that you are rising up for a cause. Like right now, like in every show we have, again, we hold space for people in those communities to come and table, like have a space on the mic to talk about like what's going on in those communities. Because we're visitors, siempre visitantes. We cannot ignore, you know, what's happening in Gaza and in Palestine. And so we're very open and speak up about that, right? And so, you know, there's people that on all sides and all understandings, and we're very clear, right, about like free Palestine and about the people. Like the governments fight, the countries, the leaders fight, and the people suffer, right? And so right now it's in front of our eyes. And so yes, we can speak to radical joy, and we can speak to having pride in our communities, and we can speak to being like strong mujeres, but at the same time, like you can't speak for one cause and ignore another, right? And so we are very like, you know, we cannot not say free Palestine, because I read something that said, like, when you're part of an oppressed group, you understand what's going on in that space, right? And when we're part of a colonizing group, you also have a different understanding. And so we, like, as Las Cafeteras and as the band, but also as a core group, like, we understand that we're still fighting for liberation, and liberation looks different for all kinds of peoples. And right now, like, this is, like, the world is on fire. Right? And they're facing the brunt of it. And so a gusto aquí cantando mis canciones, but I cannot ignore that. And I can't say I'm building, you know, a world where many worlds fit if people are dying, if babies are dying, if all kinds of, you know, injustices are happening right before our eyes. And so we're very clear to say, like, Las Cafeteras stand with Palestine for sure, with Gaza for sure, and for those peoples, and to survive, to thrive, and to rebuild. And so I'm grateful for the space to be able to say it. And, you know, not everybody understands or agrees, and we're okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
We're okay with that. And I think that's what the difference is like when your purpose is to really document and tell the stories of life now is different than like when you're writing to be famous.
Yeah.
Right? And because I think the purpose of Las Cafeteras is to continue to tell stories that are true.
Yeah.
Well,
Go
I was
ahead.
gonna say
Your harmonies are really nice. You're like, yeah.
Thank you.
I was just gonna say that I really admire that. I guess I see with a lot of artists, or I guess people who kind of are propelled into like the public stratosphere. A lot of times, it's always at the very early beginnings that their identity and where they come from and the things that they stand for are kind of the forefront of, of their art or, whatever it is that they're doing. But then as they get bigger, it kind of peters out slowly. But I really admire that that's kind of your identity, and it seems that it's always been and it always will be your identity, because I don't think you ever really see that a lot. It's usually very hollow or very few and far between. So that was all I really had to say.
Yeah, I also think that it's super important, and it was beautifully well said by you, because I think specifically our community as Mexicans, as Mexican Americans, Chicanos, I think we more than ever are the ones who should understand the fight for Palestine, like to advocate and to say free Palestine, because like you said, our community can relate to that colonial history and can relate to what it feels like to be oppressed. And I think that you said it so beautifully that I won't try and like say something even more profound. But I just think it's important just considering our cultural background. And I want to just thank you for coming on the show and giving us your beautiful perspective and just dropping a lot of like knowledge on us. Cause I think a lot of what you said is, I already know I'm going to be thinking about it the rest of the day. Cause I think, it hit in specific soft spots where I felt like there were points where I could see myself getting emotional about it if I think about it too long. So I won't, and I'll go ahead. But I just go ahead and thank you for coming on the show. You've been a pleasure to have on the show. Definitely one of my favorite episodes of this year. Yeah. I want to give a shout out to your band, Las Cafeteras, who has a new album releasing. You guys should all check it out. All links will be in the description. Thank you for coming on, Denise. It was such a pleasure to have you. Brandon, before we go,
thank you so much. Everything Steve said, I just wanted to echo that. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to come and have a little podcast with us. It was really a pleasure to have you. You're really interesting, and it was a really fun episode.
I hope we can have you back.
Yeah,
one day.
love to have
There's a
you
lot
back,
more
yeah.
to explore.
But before I send everybody off, I have to do a shout out to all of our patrons. So shout out to Yuel, Jerry Chicano, Alhazan Maron, Sarah without an H, Carlos, Steven Carbajal, and Carla Corazon. Your patronage is always appreciated. So if anybody ever wants to join the Patreon, our link is always in the bio. We really hope everybody watching enjoyed this episode. Thank you again to Denise, and we'll see you guys next week.
See ya.
Bye.